Добрый вечер, Кевин.
Dobry wieczór.
Манишма.
Manchmal kol tov lo יודע.
Э, ¿Dónde está ahora?
Estoy en Seattle. Me mudé a Seattle hace 6 meses por el trabajo.
І що ти робиш у Сіетлі? Яка в тебе робота?
Uh, Працюю в oh, искусственный интеллект. Это, наверное,
Штучний інтелект.
штучный интеллект, так.
All right, I guess that's enough for our viewers to get a taste of what is to come. Um, I'm here with Kevin Fei Sun, who lives in Seattle now. Used to
Yeah,
live in New York, at least at some point. That's where I met him.
yeah.
And Kevin is a hyper polyglot, I guess. I heard such a term. You object to it,
Think
or?
so. Yeah, I mean, I guess the bar seems low for hyper because they say six is hyper, and I'm like, six? I don't know. It also, what it means.
So how would you describe yourself?
I just like languages and sort of as a side effect ended up being able to speak a few of, I don't know. Like sometimes I feel like I just, I did linguistics in college. I spent a lot of time reading about random languages that I know that I'll never be fluent in, like I don't know, Aramaic or like Algerian Arabic or the indigenous languages of the Pacific Northwest. But I mean, in some cases, a few of the languages, I end up meeting people who speak them regularly enough. There's enough media out there that over time I end up being fluent in them also. But there's like a whole long tail of like other languages I've studied over time that do absolutely do not reach that bar.
All right, but we started our conversation, I think, in five languages. Well, if we
Yeah.
count English, we
Mhm.
spoke Russian, Ukrainian, Spanish, and Hebrew.
Yeah.
And I believe these languages you are quite fluent in, at least maybe not Ukrainian, but the others.
Uh,
No?
yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, I guess I've been focusing on others more recently, but yes, all of these I've studied to like quite intensively at some point in the past and was at one point conversational in at least. Russian I did in college. When you first started speaking to me in Ukrainian, I thought it was Polish, but then I was like, oh, wait a second, no, obviously Ukrainian makes more sense. And then I had to, but it would have been sztuczna inteligencja in Polish. But anyways,
Right,
yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought to do Polish as well, but then I decided not to, show off too much. But
Mm.
just, I think we could take it chronologically because
Yeah.
obviously no one is born speaking multiple languages. In fact, no one is born speaking any. But
Yeah.
if you could tell us where you were born, a little bit about your background, what was your first language? And how you started accumulating the languages.
Sure. Sounds good. So yeah, I was born in New York City, actually, but we moved around a lot when I was a kid. We left New York when I was a month old. So I eventually found my way back to New York afterwards. But yeah, I think the way my parents tell it, my first word was in Chinese, but then the next several hundred were probably in English because I was going to kindergarten in America and everything. So, but sort of, yeah, grew up with English, and then my parents spoke Mandarin and Shanghainese dialect as well, so I understood both, but did not speak them very well. But when I was 10 years old, we moved back to China, to Shanghai, and I went to a normal local Chinese speaking school. So,
Your parents didn't make, I'm sorry if will interrupt you occasionally.
um,
So your parents, did they make any efforts when you were a kid, to have you speak Chinese, or it just like naturally happened that you spoke?
There, I mean, I guess there was a bit of an effort. Yeah, they would speak to me in Mandarin and Shanghainese. I mean, they never really like, yeah, when I was in the US also, like they would send me to Chinese school on Saturdays to like learn Chinese. I didn't really enjoy it at the time. I only really started getting better at reading and writing Chinese after we went back to China. But yeah, there was some effort made in that direction, at least for Mandarin. And I mean, there aren't really materials for teaching Shanghainese, so you sort of just have to pick that up on your own. And I sort of did, but not that well. I understand Shanghai dialect perfectly, but I have my pronunciation is quite bad at times.
Mhm. So you moved to China, and how long did you stay there? You moved at 10,
Oh,
and then
yeah, until college. So yeah, 9 years. Yeah, and all in local Chinese speaking schools. So after the first year I caught up on Chinese, and after that I ended up with a lot more free time than my classmates because they still had to learn English in
so
school.
so I guess when you came to China, English was your dominant language.
Oh yeah.
But when you left China at 19, was it already not so, or still, or
I would say it was tricky because I mean, I feel like the way I remember my first month of freshman year in college in New York, yeah, it took a bit of getting used to just like actually speaking English all the time, every day, and just like the flow of like conversation among young people of my gen, like just like things that you don't really pick up on if, because like I mean, obviously, English is the international language, and even in China, there was plenty of opportunities to be exposed to it. We had satellite TV, we had the internet. I never lost my American accent. And yeah, but I guess, yeah, there were just like some reflexes and habits that took a second to recover. But at this point, I'd say I'm definitely, if I had to rank my languages, English is number definitely above Chinese still. I mean, because like I had to write essays in college in English. I worked for as a reporter for a while and had to write articles in English. I've never had to do any of that stuff in Chinese. So I've never worked in an office in China in a Chinese speaking workplace. So
so you definitely have native fluency in English. You have no accent in English, at least none that I could hear. But other languages, I mean, can people identify that you are from other countries in all of the languages you speak, or you were able to reach native or at least near native fluency in some of the other languages?
I don't think I've reached personally. I mean, I feel like even in Chinese, back when I was in school, like 1 out of 10 people would tell me like, "Oh, I notice you have a bit of a accent." But I mean, I don't know. I feel like sometimes there's like a perception thing. Like if you're expecting to hear an accent, you'll hear one just because like
Right.
it's not always a reliable uh metric. And I mean, I've met, yeah, I mean, sometimes I don't think like a native Russian speaker would think I'm a native speaker, but I've had people be like, "Oh, are you from like Central Asia?" Or like I speak to someone from Iran, they'll be like, "Are you from Afghanistan?" Like it's just slightly off enough. This happens where it's like, "Oh, you speak Malaysian," and they'll be like, "Oh, you have an Indonesian accent." You speak some Croatian, and they'll be like, "Oh, you have a Slovene accent."
But
Or it's not really true. It's just like it's the closest slightly bad accent that they can think of. Like,
when I
remember I
was in Slovakia, I
Mhm.
started speaking to them in a language that I thought like,
Hmm.
was probably
Yeah,
somewhat of a Polish or somewhat of Ukrainian, or,
yeah,
maybe it had some similarity to what I believe to be Slovak. And they asked me,
yeah,
"Are you from Poland?" And it was like a compliment for me
yeah,
because obviously it's closer than the language that I speak.
yeah. I remember the funniest thing that happened once, well, two times 10 years apart, but once at one of my old jobs, I had a Lebanese coworker and I spoke Arabic with him, and he said, "You have an Armenian accent." And I was like, "What the hell does that mean? How is that possible?" But then 10 years later, I lived in LA for a few years, and there's a lot of Armenians there. And I spoke to an Armenian person, and they told me, "Oh, you have a Lebanese accent." And I was like, "What the hell?" It's just like, it's just like the closest slightly different from my own accent that I can think of, and that's just the one that they pin on me because my pronunciation is generally good enough, but not quite there. And
Right. I guess these are the accents they hear most often
yeah,
in their
it was like
language. So,
like
so
you're
it's
not
pretty,
quite
it's
right,
a pretty
but
good
yeah.
recognition, I think, of your fluency. I think it's a compliment, definitely, I would say. So by the time you had graduated from high school, uh, besides Chinese and English, did you speak any other languages?
Um, Thinking back on it, I'd say honestly I did not, but I would say I was definitely already really interested in languages at the time. Like I was known in high school among my friends as the guy who speaks a dozen languages already. Although, I mean, if I use the standards I apply today, I would say I only spoke two actually, but I was interested. I'd started learning uh way too many already, French, Spanish, bit of the basics of Russian, Arabic, Japanese, and so
That's
on.
when you got to college, right?
It was
Or
like I had started trying all of these on my own already in high school, but I mean, Shanghai in the early 2000s, at least, also for a high school student, wasn't quite as international as it is these days. So it was hard to actually practice any of those. So, yeah, I mean, practically speaking, I was like maybe A2 in Spanish and French and about and then spoke like native English and Chinese, and that was it.
like what
A1.
propelled your interest in languages, if I may ask this? I know it's a general question, but like why would you, in high school want to pick up all these languages, not one, but like a bunch of them?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it always starts with the first couple ones. And for me, it was so, I mean, yeah, like I guess, like I said, I had a bit more free time than all my peers in school because they still had to take English class. And I just thought to myself, well, okay, if it's only fair if I spent some time trying to learn another language also. Um, I guess the first one I really tried learning that I got like a bunch of materials for from like a coworker of one of my parents, I think originally was for French. So got sort of into that. Found it quite interesting. Then some Spanish, and then I mean, of course, once you learn two Romance languages, you can get into like the weeds of like linguistics and like all the connections and the historical evolution and stuff there.
How about
And then
Russian? If like, why did you choose Russian?
I think let's see, probably a combination of a few different reasons. I mean, one was just it was at some point I made a decision I wanted to like target focus on the six working languages of the United Nations. I already speak two of them natively, English and Chinese. French and Spanish, relatively not too hard to learn, and then Russian and Arabic were the last two. So that was one reason. I think another one, yeah, in high school I got kind of interested in like Central Asia, like all the Stan countries. We had like some international students at our school who were from Kazakhstan. Like for a while, like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization would have their summits in Shanghai, and you would see all these like flags of different countries and Russia as well. And I guess that was one thing that also piqued my interest further. And I mean, I guess the other thing is I started college in 2008, which was probably the low point of interest in the Russian language in America because it was like the Cold War's over, like who needs Russian anymore? But also 2008 was when like the war in Georgia happened and things started to heat up a little bit. And I just thought to myself, oh, maybe Russian will be more relevant in the future again. And I mean, for unfortunate reasons, I guess it sort of has. But yeah, I mean various things. I mean also just there's certain ways that like Russian culture is represented in both American and Chinese pop culture that makes it seem kind of edgy and cool in a certain way that appeals to high school
I
kids, like
wonder, like, what do you mean? Could you give an example of what?
hackers and spies and criminals and all the like sort of like I don't know. It's like sort of I guess, but I mean I guess at the end of the day, I just like all language. I mean, another thing was just Russian is hard, and I wanted to learn something difficult because like I already speak Chinese. Like usually you want to prove you're good at learning languages, you learn Chinese. I already spoke that, and I already
Well,
spoke English.
you are kind
Mhm.
of foreshadowing my question. I wanted to ask you about how hard Russian is because you speak so
Mhm.
many languages by now, or at
Mhm.
least are familiar with I don't know. I don't want to make a mistake in the number, but I would say, in my estimation, maybe 50 languages you're familiar with, or maybe more. How would you agree that Russia? How would you rate Russian in terms of difficulty there, and what makes it difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, there's a couple caveats to make after which I could plausibly say Russian is the hardest. I mean, I guess there's among languages that an average person would ever consider learning,
Right.
it's already a stretch because I don't know, because I feel like Lithuanian is harder or like Finnish is harder, or there are various others which I mean are just, I mean, Russian isn't even that popular as a second language these days, but I mean, it's still like relatively high up on the list compared to some other languages that are definitely in certain ways more difficult. Also like among living languages, because I would say ancient Greek and Latin are harder. But I mean, yeah, I guess it's definitely, I feel like it's up there for, I guess, and I mean, I guess especially for like people who speak whose native languages has relatively little grammar in the sense of like declension and conjugation like English doesn't have or Chinese has even less of. Um, but yeah, I guess because I mean, I guess the funny thing is like usually when I talk to people who don't know anything about languages and I'm like, oh, I did Russian in college, it was pretty hard. And they're like, oh yeah, I bet it's hard. The alphabet looks so difficult. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? The alphabet is like 40% the same as the English alphabet and another 40% the same as the Greek alphabet, basically. It's not really.
In
But
terms
yeah,
of reading, probably Russian is one of the easiest. I mean, compared, let's say, to Chinese or Japanese, where
yeah,
you have
yeah. It's easy.
so
I
many
wouldn't say.
characters to learn.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. In terms of number of characters to know, I guess in terms of how phonetic it, one thing I still struggle with Russian, probably just because I read a lot more than I speak or listen, is I often do not know where the stress goes in a word. And if you don't know where the stress goes, that impacts the quality of the vowels as well. Like, and the grammar adds to that because sometimes the same word, if it's in the accusative, like the stress will jump, sometimes the stress will jump around, sometimes it won't. That's tricky. I would say, yeah,
In
some
Polish, you wouldn't have this problem.
exactly. I would say, yeah, one
In
tricky
French, I
thing with
think also, right? Other languages seem to be more regular and not
yeah, yeah,
regular.
exactly. I think for the most part, and I mean also, yeah. And for example, in Spanish, I mean, even if the stress can jump around sometimes, it's written. Like there
Right.
are rules that tell you exactly where the stress goes all the time. So yeah, I think part of it is just the not just the number of rules, but also the number of exceptions to those rules. Because a lot of times people are like, oh, Hungarian has whatever, like 13, 14 cases, Finnish has,
Okay.
but a lot of the cases are not even, they work the same way as prepositions work in like English. They're just you add a word to
Yeah.
another word, and they're all very regular. So yeah, I feel like sometimes with Russian it is sort of the number of exceptions to the rules, and I think maybe there's another level of rules that I just never learned that can help sort through some of the chaos there. But yeah, or like stress can also jump in verbs from the ending to the смотрю, смотришь, but other words are like говорю, говоришь, it's on the end all the time, and it's like what are the rules behind that, if there are any? Um, what else? I think I'd say that's the big one, and I guess just for all Slavic languages in general, the aspect thing, like совершенный вид,
Like
несовершенный.
perfect and imperfect.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, especially, well, I guess there's two parts. One is that for a lot of speakers of other Western European languages, the concept of aspect is kind of unfamiliar. It doesn't really correspond perfectly to tense. You sort of it takes a bit of thinking
But
to.
somewhat it does, I guess. Like would be совершенный it would be like more of perfect tenses, and несовершенный would be more of continuous. I mean, it's like if you want to explain it, like
Yeah, yeah.
I
There are
was I
there are, there
was
are
doing is like я делал, and I have done, yes, сделал. So
yeah. I guess there are other things where, like, for example, there's no infinite. There's also two infinitives basically. Oh, я хочу делать, я хочу говорить, я хочу сказать. Well, like, how do you distinguish those in English? I guess, I don't know. Sometimes I don't even really know all the rules around that and just like say whatever I've heard someone else say in the past and hope that it's the right context for
I
it.
just
And
learned to look quite recently. It's on another subject, but I
yeah.
learned about future tense in Polish because I was actually hearing
Ooh, yeah.
Some Ukrainian dialect, and it
Hmm.
struck me. They use when for future they say like this. Я буду варила, something like this. So
Yeah.
they
And
use
the
like a future auxiliary verb and the past. So basically, like in English, you would say, "I will cooked" or "I
yeah.
will did," and that really like was mind-boggling to me why they're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like yeah, that whole form, like the past participle, like with the L or the wu, I guess, and
That's correct, right? About Polish. I mean, I might be
yeah,
wrong.
that's
Yeah.
correct. That was sort of confusing to me for a bit also.
I think it's generally like, do you find it hard to learn languages that are similar because you might confuse them, or is how do you go get around that?
I think generally the benefit still outweighs the drawbacks of, yeah, when learning languages that are similar. I guess, well, it also depends on sort of like what stage you're at, I guess, in learning the language. Because at some point, like if it's just like learning to the basics of like how to read stuff, like picking up vocabulary, you could probably do that in parallel, and like knowing a bit of both languages is more helpful because there's overlap. You can make connections, and also if you can also just decide to like focus on the things that you know are different. Like when I was learning Portuguese, one big thing was just to always remember that especially well so that you don't use it by mistake.
What should you remember, sir, Kevin? You got frozen for a bit, and I
Oh,
didn't hear. When you were talking about Portuguese, you said you were talking about some difference, and that didn't get recorded.
right, yeah, just what was I saying? Yeah, just like remembering words that were not the same between the two. Like, I don't know, window is ventana in Spanish, but janela in Portuguese, or like olvidar is forget in Spanish, but in Portuguese you would say esquecer.
But
Or even just like
that is one thing. But another problem in such languages
Mm.
is the words that so-called false friends, of which there are hundreds. Words that sound similar
Right.
but have
And I mean, yeah, that would also be another
different
point.
meaning.
Focus.
Like
Yeah.
you would say,
Hmm.
like wroda or uroda would be beauty in Polish, and like some has to with ugliness in Russian. So something like that. This type of.
Yeah, I mean, it still helps. I mean, a false friend still helps because then you make that connection and know that they're, as opposed to, I don't know, if you started learning Mongolian tomorrow, you would have nowhere to start with any of the words. They would all look foreign and have no connection to anything, and it would just be difficult. Whereas at least having some sort of, even if it's a clash, even if it's like a conflict, it's still like a connection of some way between something you know and something you don't, which I think generally still helps. Except I'd say the one thing is just like when you're at the point where you're just trying to get like fluent in speaking and like be able to have a conversation and just like sort of when you want to get to the point where like you're not even really thinking about grammar and you're just like saying things naturally. At that point, then yeah, knowing two languages is gonna maybe you're gonna mix a lot of things up because that's like a sort of a different level of because a different level of the learning when you're trying to like internalize things and like make it reflexive and not really have to think about it at the level of like what you learn in textbook. And at that point, yeah, you can start to have problems. I used to have a lot of in crazy issues mixing up different languages. I would like use
Okay.
languages that aren't even that similar, just like structurally kind of similar. I would like speaking Japanese and randomly throw in some Hindi words, or speaking Turkish and use some Korean words because all of those languages have like generally the same structure where the verb goes at the end. Or I used to have this thing at some point in my life, I was like better at Serbian than at Spanish. So there was in Spanish, when you say how do you say, you can say como se dice. In Serbian slash Croatian, whatever you want to call it, you would say kako se kaže for how do you say, and it's literally parallel word for word with the Spanish. So I had times where I would say stuff like como se kaže or kako se dice, and I would think about it for a second and be like, oh no, I used the wrong word. And it's just like at some point, yeah, when it comes to like just like the fast reaction, actually talking to someone on the spot things, then yeah, confusion absolutely can happen, and yeah, knowing too many similar languages can cause problems there. But I think the long term, just like in terms of acquiring a base of knowledge in a language that you can use to understand things and read things, it's still overall it is beneficial. Yeah.
Okay, let me jump to something else because it was kind of difficult for us to arrange a meeting. So I just want to ask whatever I want to ask now because I don't know when I'll get in the next chance. So I
Mhm.
know that I've seen it on your Facebook. You often explore connections between ostensibly different words and
Uh-huh.
find similarity between them.
Hmm.
Right now, I wasn't preparing for it. It just occurred to me now during this program, so I cannot give you any examples, but you probably could could entertain us with a couple of examples, like you take an Arabic word and all of a sudden, through a couple of transformations, it's a Finnish word or something like that.
Yeah. There are, yeah, I mean, yeah, that definitely is something I used to do a lot more on Facebook. Nowadays, I mostly do it on Twitter because I feel like I get more likes
We
on
actually
Twitter
have
than
just 10 minutes, surprisingly,
but
but or not surprisingly, maybe. So maybe you could give us a couple of examples.
sure, sure. I think one of my favorite ones I posted a while back on Facebook was, and I mean, I feel like when you think about it, it's sort of logical that a lot of these connections go back to like ancient trade routes and the Silk Road and like languages in East Asia and in Western Europe having contact with like Arabic and Persian and Turkish in the middle. But one that really blew my mind, I guess it's like a connection between three things. So, thinking which one to start from. So back when I was a kid in China, there was like a number of popular cartoons that everyone would see on TV. One of them was this. this folk figure from Xinjiang and what is now Western China, uh, who had some similarities to like similar folk figures. Like he would be called Nasruddin Hoja in like a lot of
Right.
Central Asia, or like Joha, I think, in other parts of the Middle East. And it was called Ah Han Hee in Mandarin. And I later realized that that is the same word as efendim in Turkish, which is just like sir. And that in modern Turkish, it basically just means sir. Efendi used to be sort of like, I think, a rank within like Turkish society, like a noble, I think. But what really blew my mind was that Efendi comes from Greek and is the same word as the English word authentic,
Oh,
because authentic in modern Greek became authentikos, I guess. So the same word that was just like the name of this cartoon character that I grew up watching in China, and the English word authentic were just connected because of in between because, well, yeah, because like they were
well,
Turks
how
and
did that transformation occur? Like, what's the connection, like lexically, between, I mean, as far as semantically, I wanted to say, between sir
so authentic.
um,
I think I
and
think my understanding is
authentic?
that authentic originally meant something like authoritative,
Okay.
like and an effendi or an authentis was a lord, basically someone who had authority, who could decide that something is true, is real, is correct. Um, and in I guess in Western languages, the meaning shifted, whereas effendi kept something closer to the original meaning, and that sort of spread the other way along the Silk Road all the way to Central Asia and Western China. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of any other good ones.
Since we have like if just a few minutes, I mean, I think that's fine because I'm sure
Yeah.
we could talk about it forever. And I
Mm.
didn't even ask half of the questions I wanted to ask. But since we're getting to the end, could you like give us a ballpark figure of how many languages you're familiar with to some extent that you could speak? I don't know, like I don't know how to frame this question so
Yeah,
you
I
could
don't,
answer.
because it's like at some point, I usually go around, I mean, for years, I've been going around telling people I speak eight, or sometimes expanding that to between eight and 15. Um, but then I'll run into someone from Bulgaria and I'll speak to them in Bulgarian, and Bulgarian is probably like number 30 something. So, like, that wouldn't even go on the list. But I, like, if we set the bar, like, yeah, I would say like languages at B2 are above level, like eight probably. There are a lot that are borderline B1, B2, but a little bit lower, like I can read something in it, or like sort of have like an enough of a conversation to make like a native speaker be like, what the hell, why do you know my language? Potentially 30. I mean, I don't know. There's also like a thing where, I mean, at this moment right now, I probably could do that in 20, but like if I had a bit of preparation, it could go back
So
up to 30
so
because there are languages that I have neglected for years that I have not been
So,
doing at
in
all.
other words, if we continued our conversation that we started at the start of this program, we could extend it for another couple of minutes, I guess, with all the all the how are yous and where do you lives in different languages. Um, I know you wear a T-shirt with flags. Uh, these are the languages that you know, right? That's why you made a
Well,
T-shirt
those are
for
the
that.
languages. Yes. So yeah, let me think. It's been a while since because that was more suited for like big events with, back when I was living in LA, every month there would be a big event with 100 people there. So it was like a good way to just get the attention of people I could talk to in all sorts of different languages. And yeah, I think that one did have 24 languages on it. But every couple months, I would like change my mind and be like, oh, I don't actually speak Vietnamese. I should replace it with Indonesian. Or I don't actually speak Kazakh anymore. Maybe I should replace it with Amharic or something. So like the solid core of that shirt, I would say was maybe Yeah, 15. Something like, yeah, so English, Mandarin, Russian, French, Spanish, German, Serbian, Serbo-Croatian, whatever you want to call it, Japanese, Korean, Hebrew, Arabic, Turkish, Hindi, Portuguese, and Italian. That's 15, I think, unless I double counted something. Those are probably the ones that I also just like I would most regularly encounter people at meetups and actually be able to have the opportunity to talk to would be maybe those 15-ish languages.
That's really impressive, but I'm also impressed with all the so-called exotic, at least we call them exotic at my work. I work as a court interpreter, and
Okay.
at least they refer to this language as exotic. I don't know, it's probably a somewhat politically correct word maybe by now, but I mean, those rare languages that you've started to learn, could you give us some examples of such? Because I remember you learned something like Sinhalese, or what was it called? Some India, some.
Never tried Sinhalese actually, but let me see. I feel like the one that people always name as an obscure language is Telugu, which actually has like 80 million speakers, which is like more than a good amount of European languages. But
I heard of
yeah,
it. It's an African language.
no, it's Indian. It's
What's
South
an Indian?
Indian.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
Telugu.
actually the most spoken Dravidian language, more speakers than Tamil by a little bit, I think. And yeah, I started been messing with it on and off for maybe 5, 6 years at this point. But yeah, especially working in tech, like I will often run into people who speak Telugu, and first off, they're amazed that I know what Telugu is because they're very used to people not even knowing that their language exists. But yeah, it's spoken in two Indian states now, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, sort of like in the middle south of the country. Uh, yeah, and I guess at some point I was just like, oh, maybe I should finally learn a South Indian language, and I ended up. It took a while for me to decide between Tamil and Telugu, but yeah, I picked Telugu maybe
What language would you like to learn that you haven't learned yet?
that I haven't. I mean, haven't learned is the tricky part because I mean, almost everything I'm interested in, I've at least dabbled in a little bit
Okay.
already. So it's like tricky to really, really say something I have n pick something I have no idea of. But Guarani of the South American language spoken in Paraguay. I
Right.
have not learned any of absolutely. I maybe I know one word or
Okay.
a few words, but yeah,
We're
because
almost we're almost out of time. I just wanted to ask you, did you learn Albanian at some?
yeah,
Do you know
And
how
New
to
York,
say do you know how to say bye in Albanian?
Miru Pafshim.
Which is funny because in Russian it would mean peace to the fallen, and
Yeah, yeah.
that helped me to remember it. And that I think would be fitting to say right now because we don't have time left.
You,
So thank you very much. Miru
you,
Pavshim, bye, and
but
do widzenia. Hope to talk to you soon.